It's an absolute pleasure to have been invited to be here with you today. And I'm so appreciative of my colleague, Kimberly, with YWCA St. John's, but also the folks at ARAISA for asking me to be here and to talk about some of the research that we've been doing in Newfoundland and Labrador. Can you all hear me clearly in the back? Okay, wonderful. As my colleague Laura Bell just mentioned, I am a professor in the School of Social Work at Memorial University in Newfoundland and Labrador. And at the university, I do a lot of research related to LGBTQ plus people in general, but more specifically looking at experiences of racialized LGBTQ plus newcomers. And more recently, through the research project that I've been doing with the YWCA, we've expanded the scope of the research to begin to also look at LGBTQ newcomers in general as well. So that's what I'm going to be presenting on today, is the research that we've done and some of the findings that emerged from that particular research. And if you have any questions, I can take them as I go along, or you can wait until the end. I want to begin with a series of questions, and it's going to require some audience participation. So when I ask the first questions, I just want people to generally, yell out the answers that comes to mind, okay? So the first question is asking, what images or characteristics come to mind when you think about newcomers? Anyone? Resilience. Anyone else? Images, characteristics that come to mind when you think about who LGBTQ newcomers are, or who newcomers are, excuse me. Diversity, okay. What else? What was that? I didn't hear that one. Tenacious, tenacity, yes. Anyone else? Curiosity, okay. What about images?
Flags.
What was that?
Flags.
Flags, okay. What kind of flags?
Like country flags.
Country flags, okay. What else? What was it? Clothes, okay, yeah. What else? I think I might come down actually. It's a bit, I think I'm not hearing clearly in the back there. Anyone else? What was it? Opportunities, okay. Good food, okay. Yes. Family, what kind of family? What do you have in mind when you're thinking about family? A man and a woman, okay, okay. What about, well, the second question is, why do we tend to associate these specific images or characteristics with newcomers? So everything everyone has been saying, why do we generally associate some of these characteristics and images to newcomers?
Difference.
What was that? Difference, okay.
Because it's assumed like the white Western center is the base.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Ah, wonderful.
Culture.
What was it?
Culture.
Shelter? Culture, okay. I do apologize. I do think I need to go check my hearing, but anyone else?
So I said resilience, and that's from lived experience. So I know what it's like to be a newcomer, and knowing what like my parents went through, I know how hard it was. So I think of that just based on the experiences of what it is to go from one to the other.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. What the media portrays. Okay, hold on to that as well. So hold on to the gentleman here. What was your name, sir? Right here. What is your name? Ibrahim. Okay, so hold on to what you just said, and also hold on to what you just said there as well. Anyone else? Yes.
Confusion about the journey of moving into the cycle.
Yes, confusion. Thank you. Anyone else?
Just maybe a reminder, we need everyone to speak into the mic so that the interpreters can hear them and so that it can be translated. Thanks.
Okay, so we can move on to the next question then. Who is typically excluded from these common images of newcomers? Right. Oh, we got one here, and then we got one here.
What Orlando said, white folks who appear as white.
Okay.
When Ibrahim was talking about like queer families and people with disabilities.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, in the back there.
People who come alone, not with
People
their
who come alone,
families.
without families, okay. Okay, so I will move on to the next question then. the last question, what factors might contribute to the exclusion of these individuals from the image of newcomers? So what are some of the structural, systemic, political factors that you think, cultural factors that you think might be contributing to some of the reasons why, the images that we've been talking about are so, prominent in our thinking around who newcomers are? Yes.
Hold on, we have someone over here, and then I'll bring the mic over.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
The way our IRCC contracts are written, the people that we serve are the people that we are paid to serve in general. So we usually highlight those clients.
Right. Awesome, thank you. Oh, okay, yes.
Stereotypes.
What was that?
Stereotypes.
Okay, thank you.
Ça allait être en fait, pardon, mon intervention, stéréotype, aussi en fait mindset, culture et environnement.
Right.
Et surtout les médias.
Okay, I see.
The idea of white saviorism.
White saviorism, okay, awesome. Thank you. Oh, one last one there. Oh, sorry, maybe two then, go ahead.
I think also definitions, like I've heard newcomers are sometimes not new at all. They might be immigrants or even Canadian citizens that were not born in Canada. So definitions can also be confusing.
Yes, absolutely, thank you. And one just behind you there.
C is heteronormativity.
Heteronormativity, awesome, thank you. Okay, so thank you all for doing that. And again, keep in mind some of the responses that you've heard and also you've shared as we move along with the presentation. So with respect to the images and the characteristics that we oftentimes imagine when we think about who newcomers are, as my colleague here, Ibrahim, said, and I think I heard from other folks as well too, when I did a quick Google search of newcomers to Canada or just in general, these are some of the images that we see that saturate our imaginations of what constitute newcomers. So typically you will see a man and a woman and kids, or you will see, as another individual said there, an individual who is not necessarily part of how we think of newcomers coming into the country, because again, there is a particular kind of cultural notion of what constitute the kind of arrangement. And what we see most of the times are the images before you here. And one of the challenges that we inevitably have to confront with is that these images represent one-dimensional kind of narrative in terms of what newcomers are, right? And what that also means is that other narratives and experiences get occluded or excluded from these conversations. So people who are LGBTQ plus newcomers are not necessarily factored in our imagination of what constitute newcomers. The research study that we did in Newfoundland and Labrador has been ongoing since 2021, I want to say. So it's a 5-year RCC project that we've been doing. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to kind of be involved in this project, because for the first time in the history of Newfoundland and Labrador, we've been able to begin a research study that actually looks at the experiences of LGBTQ plus newcomers, right? So for the longest time, the understanding and definitely the way organizations have been behaving is as if LGBTQ newcomers are actually not part and parcel of the newcomers that they're actually interacting with or dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And now with the studies that we've been doing, it actually shows unequivocally that LGBTQ newcomers are actually part of the social fabric of Newfoundland and Labrador. And we need to begin to imagine them in the programs and services that we actually create. Because the fallout of not doing so is that inevitably people start to think about out-migration, which is a push factor for those individuals who might otherwise actually see themselves living in the province, now thinking about moving elsewhere. Typically, we see people moving to Ontario, we see them going into Quebec, and we see them going into Vancouver, the trifectas of out-migration sites. So it's really, really important that provinces like Newfoundland and Labrador begin to really think and reimagine the ways in which to think about their settlement and integration policies and procedures. Before you, here are a couple of articles, foundational articles that was actually published looking at the experiences of LGBTQ plus newcomers and settlement and LGBTQ plus organizations in Newfoundland and Labrador. And what I think is really interesting about the research that we've been doing is, and I think we've now seen a bit of a difference, particularly when you think about the article, the research report that we actually published in 2025, that I wrote in combination with YWCA. And what we see that is a bit, consistent in terms of the research study is the fact that people are still talking, service providers are still talking about the fact that they still don't have enough understanding and experience about what LGBTQ newcomers are actually experiencing when they are in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. All right. So that kind of sentiment is still ones that we see both in 2018 when we did the study, the 2021 study that we did, and also 2024 study that we did. More recently, when we actually gave a presentation to a settlement organization in Newfoundland and Labrador, and I asked, a series of questions like I did at the beginning of this presentation, what inevitably came up was that people actually showed more hands around their understanding of the existence of LGBTQ plus newcomers in Newfoundland and Labrador. In the past, that hasn't necessarily been the case. So slowly, we're seeing an evolution in terms of people now beginning to recognize that those individuals, LGBTQ plus newcomers, are actually in the mix of newcomers that they're dealing with. So there were several questions that we were trying to ascertain responses to or answers to for the research that we did. The first question was, what are the settlement and integration experiences of LGBTQ plus newcomers in Newfoundland and Labrador? The second question is, what settlement services and integration support are most sought or needed for effective settlement and integration? The third question is, what are the barriers to successful settlement and integration? The fourth question was asking, what can settlement and LGBTQ service providers do to better meet the needs of LGBTQ newcomers? And finally, what is the current capacity of settlement and LGBTQ organizations to meet or respond to the settlement and integration needs of LGBTQ plus newcomers? I know people don't typically enjoy this part, but I think it's really, really important to show that we were actually ethical in the way we went about doing the research. So I will run through this really, really quickly. This particular research that we did was a qualitative study. We collected social demographic information to better understand who the participants were that were actually participating in the research study. LGBTQ newcomers, there in total were 14. So we did anonymous survey because again, we wanted to make sure that we're reaching across the island of Newfoundland and Labrador. And that also included asking us to essentially introduce an anonymous survey into the mix. So there were 4 people that actually completed the survey. We did in-depth semi-structured 1-hour virtual interviews with 10 individuals. All of the interviews were audio and video recorded with participant consent. And also we did this through recruitment using flyers, word of mouth, purposive and snowball sampling. And we also offer $50 honorarium to participants to recognize their time and contribution to the research study. With respect to settlement and LGBTQ plus service providers, there were 3 individuals that we were able to actually, interview for the research. Again, similar to what we did with the LGBTQ plus newcomers, we went through in-depth semi-structured 1-hour virtual interviews. These were also audio recorded with consent of participants. Recruitment flyers also use word of mouth, purposive and snowball sampling, but for the service providers, we did not provide honorariums. Participants also completed informed consent. As I said, audio recordings were professionally transcribed. We used thematic coding and data analysis to be able to analyze our data, and ethics clearance was provided by the university that I'm employed at. Yes. Okay. Vas-y.
Alors, par rapport, ma question porte plus sur, c'est une question de curiosité sur le nombre de personnes questionnées, le panel. Vous avez en fait évoqué le nombre de 14 personnes par rapport aux nouveaux arrivants qui ont été questionnés. Ma question porte sur le 14. Première question, est-ce que c'est un panel qui est représentatif? On parle qualitativement, vous l'avez spécifié. 14, c'est pas peu, c'est pas parlant. Deuxième question, pourquoi 14? Est-ce qu'il y a une difficulté à trouver des gens qui vont témoigner, qui vont donner leur feedback? Ou c'est quoi exactement? Parce que personnellement, statistiquement parlant, je trouve que 14, ça peut vous induire en erreur. Excusez ma question. Merci.
Not at all. Don't be sorry. It's a good question. And the reason why it's 14 probably has a lot to do with the cultural context of Newfoundland and Labrador. I can probably bet that if I was to do this kind of research, say in Ontario, the number probably will be different. just because that there's a sheer number of LGBTQ plus newcomers who probably, because of the resources that are available in those contexts, probably already kind of connected to those resources and support. So it will not be difficult to be able to actually identify some of those participants to be in the research. Newfoundland and Labrador, if you're really familiar with the context of Newfoundland and Labrador, it's a small niche kind of community where I think people who are coming from, Global South, as an example, still have connections to back home. That oftentimes they worry about the lack of privacy that they may actually lose as a result of coming out. So the idea of actually doing a research project where people don't necessarily understand some of the measures that have been put in place to actually ensure anonymity and confidentiality, people might actually just say, I don't want to do that, right? So that definitely contributes to some of the reasons why we don't see an uptake in the number of people who are actually doing the research. And similarly for the LGBTQ service providers, I assume that this probably has to do with the fact that within those organizations, they are actually not providing LGBTQ specific support and services to those communities. And as a result, they don't necessarily feel like they have the capacity or the understanding of the lived experiences of those individuals. And therefore, that is a barrier in of itself for people actually engaging with the research, right? So I think that's what we're inevitably seeing in the data. And there's nothing, I would love to have 40 people be, involved, but there's absolutely nothing I can do in terms of, coercing people to be involved in the research. I can only show you the outcome of that research and definitely explain some of what I think are some of the factors that are contributing to the low number. Okay? Awesome. So in terms of the socio-demographic characteristics of the participants, this is the way they break down. And clearly you can see that of all the participants, there were more temporary residents than, say, permanent residents or refugee or folks who were actually receiving the Canada-Ukraine authorization for emergency travel. Also, what is interesting about this particular demographic is that the majority of them were people who identify or quote unquote what we call racialized. So people coming from Chile, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Ecuador, India, China, and so on and so on. So the majority of the participants that we were talking to were people who were coming from those global south and Asiatic kind of countries. And it's really, really important, particularly in trying to understand the experiences and the regions of the tapestry of experiences that those individuals actually have, and they bring it into the province in Newfoundland and Labrador. And also you can see the length of stay that people have been in Newfoundland and Labrador. That is also represented there as well. With respect to the social demographics for the LGBTQ service providers, this is the way they kind of break down. Again, people were not necessarily forthcoming with the race, ethnicity, gender part, and the age, but it is clear that they were working in the settlement field. And also we see the numbers of years that they've been practicing. So I want to move quickly into some of the findings that we found. With respect to the question around what are the settlement and integration experiences of LGBTQ newcomers in Newfoundland and Labrador, the ones that you see in red are the ones that I really want to spotlight. So being in Newfoundland has afforded the opportunity for introspection and self-discovery. This is really, really profound and is also an unexpected finding in the research, because what inevitably people were talking about was that in the country that they were coming from, inevitably they were not able to actually, come to themselves or actually feel a sense of their own sense of identity because of the political, economical, cultural challenges that they were actually dealing with in those countries. So when they got here, it was the first time that they actually had the opportunity to be able to actually reflect introspectively about who they are, their sense of identity, and to connect with communities of people who are like them as well. So it's really, really profound in terms of its importance. Questionable settlement organization support, high initial engagement, but little ongoing support. So people also felt that even when they came to Newfoundland and Labrador, there was a sense of settlement organizations rushing out to want to, seem as welcoming to them. But then what also happened was that there was a drop-off in terms of the continuity of that support. So people felt isolated and alone. Whiteness as a perceived factor of who received assistance or support. So depending on who you're talking to in the research study, particularly if you're talking about people who identify as being racialized, their perception was that white LGBTQ plus newcomers were receiving better services compared to them. Similarly, when you talk to white LGBTQ plus newcomers, they didn't necessarily feel that they were actually receiving better support and settlement assistance than non-white individuals. So depending on who you're talking to and the cultural context and positionality of those individuals, you also got different responses as well too. And so what does this mean for settlement providers and organizations? It really just means that you need to know who your service users are, and you need to make sure that you're actually meeting them where their needs are at, and making sure that your services and programs also are designed to be able to effectively meet the needs of those individuals. Few settlement access points: internalization office, YWCA, Planned Parenthood, and ANC. Those were the points where people thought that they could actually receive support. But again, depending on which organization you're talking about, some of those organizations are actually not offering LGBTQ plus specific support, but rather they were just offering a general, racial affinity kind of support. So you may, as an example, folks who were talking about the internalization office at Memorial University will say that, they will go there as a drop-in and have coffee with other, racialized individuals who are coming from different countries. The services that they were receiving was not LGBTQ specific, but it did provide a context for them to actually meet with other people who are coming from international contexts. Yes.
Just a quick question. When you were talking about people saying they felt they were receiving better service or not receiving better service, what were they contextualizing as what was better and what wasn't?
This is a good example right here. No worries. So in this particular participants, these individuals were saying that I would say that they are pushed and make it seem like, okay, it is a perfect place and things are going so well. And if I'm being honest, when I moved here, I had a lot of shock knowing that what I was having seen on the internet or what I've seen on the internet or what I've seen on TV is not actually what it's been, what I'm actually experiencing. And although moving here, I moved alone and I didn't have any family members. Moving here with me, I had to maneuver everything myself and it wasn't easy. And I'm still learning. I'm trying to understand the place still today. Although I've been here for like 2 years. And if I tell someone like, I've been here for 2 years and, oh, well, you've been here for 2 years. So that means that you should understand and know the place very well. But it is not how it is for me. And I'm still in the learning process. There have been ups and downs, but I say I'm glad to still be alive. So that's one particular participant. But just to pose that to this particular participant here, we talked about, from the beginning, they have done a very good job. They met us at the airport. They placed us in a hotel. They helped us to get the number and made appointments for credit cards and MCP cards. So the MCP card are cards that you actually need as a way to get access to medical services. That is so far. Afterwards, there's no support and we don't feel very happy and not very comfortable. And there's a reason, because they have employed many people from our country and we did not feel comfortable and say because our people are still very homophobic. And it was very embarrassing because they have the file and it says family of 2. So they kept asking us in front of our people, are you brothers? And I didn't feel comfortable and safe to say no. We are not officially husbands because it is impossible in our country to get married. But we are common law partners. And I said, no, we're not brothers. And they asked a few times, and it's not like I'm ashamed to tell it, but I don't want to have any problems with our people. And actually, that was the reason we did not feel very comfortable and safe at hotels as well, because very obvious 2 old men stay in the same king bedroom. So something weird, right? And if you stay here for a couple of days, it is okay. No one would know. But in a few days, everyone knows that their neighbors are gay. So and that was the reason we rushed to look for our own apartments. So people were really contextualizing some of the challenges that they were facing with respect to settlement services that they were receiving. In this particular context here, we have 2 couples, both white, talking about some of the experiences that they had around settlement services and how at the beginning it felt like they were being responsive, but then clearly it dropped off. Similarly, we had other people talking about some of the cultural context of location, where that also makes it difficult for them to be able to actually come out to be able to receive the kind of services that they need. 2 different experiences, but if you ask them both of them are equally saying that one is receiving better services than the other. In this particular case, 2 white gay men are saying the opposite, that they felt that, yeah, they got the services at the beginning, but then it was not sustained long term. Okay. So here, what settlement services and integration support are most sought or needed for effective settlement organizations? So again, the ones in red are the ones that I want to prioritize. So settlement support programs and services are scarce. Desire for racial affinity social support groups, which I've already alluded to. prioritizing the establishment of a community of friendship, support, and belonging before utilizing formal support. This is also really, really important. Oftentimes, we think about our services, formally as being the most important for our service users. But what these participants were actually saying is that prioritizing informal support and services is also critically important. So things like, organizing, informal events like going camping might be a way to actually get people to get connected with themselves, but also begin to make connections with other people around them. Community navigator, someone who can assist in making connections and becoming rooted in the LGBT community was also important. Access to low-cost mental health and medical services. I don't think for many people in the room, this would be a surprise, given some of the traumatic experiences that people who are migrated into new contexts may bring with them as well. LGBTQ plus focused newcomer settlement organization. This was an idea that was thrown out as a possibility for actually beginning to address some of the vacuum of service continuity that exists within the province of Newfoundland, Labrador. And people thought that maybe when you have an LGBTQ newcomer settlement organization, that will begin to close some of the gaps that they were actually experiencing in terms of accessing services and support. So what are some of the barriers to successful settlement and integration? People talked about the fact that the settlement services were actually skewed more towards non-LGBTQ plus newcomers. And again, the importance of centralizing the experiences of LGBTQ plus newcomers came front and center. Past negative experiences also act as a disincentive for engaging in self-disclosure with settlement and LGBTQ services providers. So oftentimes when we imagine that our clients or service users are actually being dishonest or they're not being transparent, we need to also contextualize the fact that these individuals may actually be thinking about their own safety and also keeping in mind the cultural context that they're actually in. So that might actually be a disincentive for them to actually disclose information. Employing members of the same community as LGBTQ plus newcomers also presents an obstacle to service utilization. So in our practices, we oftentimes imagine this as being the best practice approach. But what these participants are actually saying is that when you are employing folks who are coming from the same communities as LGBTQ plus newcomers, there's challenges that you may inevitably encounter, whereas that those individuals that you've now hired actually are bringing to this, country here homophobic ideas around what it means to be LGBTQ+. And those are the individuals that we're then asking to be providing services to those individuals. That can actually create a barrier for people to actually access your services and support. So again, thinking about who you're hiring and making sure that they have the best experiences and skill sets to be able to provide the services that you need them to provide. Transportation problems and distance of the program location. Again, if you're in Newfoundland and Labrador, transportation system is not the best. So if you are located downtown and you're expecting folks to come downtown, but they live not necessarily in downtown because it's expensive to find a home in downtown, it's going to be a challenge for folks to also get the services and support that they need because of the transportation distances and the geographical location that they're placed in. So thinking carefully about where you're located, where you're offering your programs is equally important as the rest of the services that we're offering to individuals. So what can settlement and LGBT service providers do to better meet the needs of LGBT newcomers? Support groups that do not conflict with work hours. So again, we have individuals who are trying to put food on the table, right? So when they have to attend or they have to make a decision between doing that or attending support groups, they may just choose the latter, right? In terms of working and not attending the support group. So again, thinking to avoid the conflict and to make sure that people can actually get the services that they need. Understanding newcomer diversity intersections and helping non-LGBT newcomers realize others' rights initiates support. So again, what we're talking about here, particularly when we're thinking of settlement orientations that we offer to newcomers, that's a prime opportunity to be able to help all of the newcomers understand the rights of LGBTQ plus people when they get into this province. Because again, it's about really sensitizing people to that information so that people don't harbor homophobic sentiments that might create friction in terms of people being able to access services and support. And also intersectionality, we've been talking about that pretty much since yesterday. So again, recognizing the importance of intersectionality in terms of participants. Need for LGBTQ information during settlement orientation, practical assistance with employment, furniture, food banks, English classes, translation. Translation was really, really important, and the difficulty of actually finding translation where people feel like they can actually be themselves and be able to actually share their own lived experiences. Is that me? Need for emotional support and legal counsel. Again, participants talked about the importance of emotional support and also having access to legal support so that they can, when they're actually dealing with immigration, actually have the support that they need to be able to process any kind of legal paperwork that needs to be processed. Facilitate more get-togethers and trips like camping for people to socialize, and central information gateway. So a hub for connecting people to needed resources. So this will be a way to actually avoid some of the silo characteristics of settlement, but also LGBTQ plus newcomers, LGBTQ organizations that currently exist in Newfoundland and Labrador. So we can begin to actually bridge that silo through a central gateway. And in terms of the capacity of LGBTQ plus service organization, one of the things that came out loud and clear was insufficient understanding of the issues, needs, and also best practices for providing help to LGBTQ plus newcomers. So again, as I said, this is kind of consistent with the findings that we found in the research that we did back in 2018, 2021. And again, here we see it recurring. And it actually tells us that training sessions like this, where we're helping professionals develop their expertise around the needs of LGBT newcomers, is sorely needed. Awareness of the need for trauma-informed, culturally competent care. However, lack of training to acquire such knowledge also poses a barrier. So again, despite interest among LGBTQ plus service providers and settlement providers as well too, they still feel that there's a critical gap in terms of their professional understandings of the trauma-informed perspective or practices and how to be able to deploy that in the work that they're actually doing. Desire to provide safer spaces for LGBTQ plus newcomers to receive supportive services as well too. So again, we see this kind of desire and an interest in wanting to create safe spaces for LGBTQ plus newcomers, and lack of organizational capable of adequately supporting LGBTQ newcomers, as well as reservations about sending LGBTQ newcomers to existing organizations. So what these particular participants were talking about was that though they recognize that there may be services within the community, they didn't necessarily feel strongly that those services will be able to actually meet the needs of LGBTQ newcomers. So they had a fear and a reservation about actually sending those clients to those organizations. Three main discussions that I think is important are as follows. The effective erasure of LGBTQ newcomers and families from public consciousness is facilitated by the heteronormative design and delivery of services and programs, which constitute a multitude of obstacles to successful settlement and integration. This erasure then also persists as LGBTQ newcomers internalize their own marginalization and perpetuate it through perceived safety-related concerns. So again, it's not that clients are necessarily wanting to be evasive in terms of disclosing themselves, but there may be other factors that is actually leading them to still conceal their identity and not disclose it. In the realm of settlement and LGBTQ service, where hiring individuals from the same communities as LGBT newcomers may be considered best practice, this approach may also reawaken the fear and sense of persecution that compelled one to flee their country of origin, thereby also impeding services as well. So those are three discussion points that I really want to leave you with. In terms of the conclusion, I just want to say that, again, as I said at the outset, this is an important research study that we did in Newfoundland and Labrador. To my colleague's point there, the data in terms of the numbers of participants is not huge. So I cannot necessarily generalize completely to the experiences of all LGBT newcomers who may be in Newfoundland and Labrador and chose not to participate in the research. Nonetheless, I think it provides service settlement providers and LGBTQ service organizations with critical information that they may need to be able to begin to think more strategically about the services that they offer, who is included and who is excluded in those services, and begin to kind of do some of the work that we're doing here to learn more about those, about LGBTQ newcomers, and begin to think critically about introducing some of those programs and services into the repertoires of the services and programs that they offer. And finally, recommendations. Settlement and LGBT organizations must take an effort to provide training and opportunities to staff in order to assist them in obtaining the information and skills needed to serve LGBTQ plus newcomers effectively. Organizations with a modest presence in this area must intensify or scale up their level of services and programming in ways that overcome the transportation and distance issues. Again, it's really, really important. There are some organizations in Newfoundland and Labrador that are offering services like YWCA, But again, thinking more strategically about where we are actually located and making sure that we can actually bring participants to those programs and services that we're offering. The need for organizational policies and practices to be harmonized is a component of the solution to establishing a response that is culturally also informed. And finally, the moment may have come, at least in the context of Newfoundland and Labrador, to be thinking about the formation of an LGBTQ plus newcomer segment organization, again, for the reasons I've already alluded to, which is really about closing the silo kind of, services that are right now, where LGBT newcomers have to go to one organization to get certain kind of services met, and then they have to go to another organization to get other needs met. But creating a settlement organization where all of those needs will actually be responded to might be an option for people to be considering. So I'll leave it there and I'll take any questions. Thank you.